Welcome, everybody. I'm Amy Orlov. I'm the Director of Professional Programs at Forte, and welcome to Forte's Business Essentials. This series is all about bringing you real-world insights from experts and business leaders that these insights are going to help you grow and lead with confidence. And I'm so glad you're joining us today for an allyship guide for people in power with Julie Kratz. While I'm going to ask my colleague Alexia to take down our slides, I'm going to ask Julie to pull hers up, and then I'll go ahead and turn things over to Julie.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for being an ally all these years. It's great to be back with the Forte crew. And I'm excited to share. I have a new book out called We Want You, an allyship guide for people with power. So you're hot off the presses, new research, new content that hopefully you can relate to as the world needs more allies now more than ever. My background, I spent 12 years in corporate America, mostly as a people leader. And I do a lot of research now. I teach at a university, have a podcast, Forbes column, etc. All really focused on how to build inclusive workplace culture so that everyone feels seen, they feel heard, and they feel a sense of belonging, which, as you can imagine, is quite elusive even nowadays. And my why is my kiddos. I've got three girls, and there are reasons that I want to be a better ally. I want the world to be more inclusive, and I want them to work in environments that are more inclusive than I had in my own corporate experience. So if you're new to the conversation around allyship, this can feel like a lot. If you're really tenured, this could feel a little too little. I try to strike a balance somewhere in between. So stay with me on the journey. I won't be able to solve the world's problems today. I wish. Amy and I will try. But we know that this is a journey and this is a long game, especially right now as we're weathering quite a storm, as you can imagine. So the tenets I'll just walk you through today briefly, give you a quick overview on some of the chapters of the book. What I found very hit me just incredibly suddenly is that what's really holding us back from getting more allies, especially for people with power, is this fear factor. And I screw up, I'm going to get it wrong, I'll risk no reward. So, kind of flipping this false narrative. How to recognize our power. A lot of people told me I don't have any power, even people with C-suite titles. And so we don't see the power that we have often. And what's in it for me? We need to emphasize the benefits of allyship. There's a lot of reward and a perceived over risk. And then do's and don'ts and practices I've seen work and not work, some counterintuitive ways to look at something like allyship. That word has been ballooned and used a lot over the years. I really, when I say ally, just mean being supportive of somebody that's different from you. And it's progress over perfection. It's not a self-proclamation. It's really in the eye of the beholder that we see allyship thrive. Then I'll wrap up with 7 practices, and then I'll use some live polling here today to get your input, and we'll wrap up with kind of commitment. So be ready to share kind of one thing you're taking from today's conversation. So if you could, I'm going to make this QR code kind of big up at the top, and Alexia is also helping with the chat with links and things, and the directions are up at the top. But if you think about allyship, where would you place your level of knowledge on the topic as we enter the conversation? And this really helps me. It helps me understand kind of how to meet you where you're at. And it also, we use this kind of before and after the topic. So I'll open this up at the end. Just see if we were able to have a measurable impact. This is anonymous. We're not tracking you. I promise not to spam you. If you want to sign up for my email newsletter, I'll share at the end an opportunity to do that, but I absolutely will not be able to track you from entering anything here. It's all anonymous. So feel free to share. Looks like we have some kind of in the middle allies and some more tenured allies. So a fun kind of mixed group today. Thanks for filling out the poll. So, another activity, think about a time when you worked in a diverse and inclusive environment. How did it feel? Like, what are some of the feelings that are elicited when we experience diversity? And not just race and gender, of course, that's important, but age, industry, background, cultural diversity, socioeconomic diversity. There's lots of just diverse perspectives. What does that look like? And thanks, Alexia, for sharing in the chat the link. Yeah, exciting. Yeah, I feel energized by it. Like, oh, different perspectives, different ways of thinking. That's so cool, right? Challenging but rewarding. Yeah, we do know the data on this. Diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams, but they have to be inclusive. So the I really comes before the D, and um, decisions can take longer. So I actually teach decision making, and we know diverse perspectives are really important for solid decision making, for effective decision making, but it does prolong the decision making process. Not always, but sometimes all that perspective taking takes time. Divergent thinking, new ideas, challenging thoughts and ideas in positive ways. Yeah, it can be overwhelming too. Yeah, a lot of, as we bridge across differences, it can be a little bit overload. Yeah. So I appreciate kind of sharing that feedback there and some positives and some opportunities, it sounds like. Um, so one of my favorite song lyrics ever is by Pink Floyd, and it's the song I Wish You Were Here. And it goes, I'm not going to sing because I sing terribly, but it's we're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year. So this is what happened in the research. I kept hearing this analogy. I did like 50 different interviews with people, and they told me, like, you don't see it. The fish don't see the water. Like we're swimming in the water and we don't see it. And that's what allyship was like for folks with power. Is I'm swimming in this bowl thinking everybody's having the same experience as me, and I realize like they're having a very different experience in the workplace because of things outside of their control. And why we need to define this as a problem is we can't solve problems if we refuse to see that there is a problem. And there is a problem. I mean, in corporate spaces, we only have 11% women as CEOs, a fraction higher in the C-suite in totality, mostly in HR and marketing roles. Layer in ethnic diversity, racial diversity, and it gets painfully lower. So we're not making the best decisions if we're not reflecting the consumer bases that we hope to serve. And I frame this as and rather than an underrepresentation problem, this is an overrepresentation problem, right? And so we have data on this. I know Forte followers, I'm sure, are familiar with McKinsey data, so I won't belabor this, but I think framing this as an overrepresentation problem, that we're not going to have enough people to fill the roles that are available. Like we have forecasted labor shortages. We have a pipeline problem. Most of my companies that I'm working with are not able to succession plan, talent manage, especially in like the mid to higher leadership, just because the exodus of baby boomers isn't being replaced. And we're not going to have the same developmental cycle and time to prepare the next generation because this sheer size of the baby boomer generation. We have a global talent shortage forecasted by 2030. AI is not going to replace 85 million jobs. And so this is a real challenge and a business problem that allyship can help with. So allyship can help close this gap by creating more inclusive environment for all people to feel seen, heard, and belong, right? It bubbles up so that you have more ability to promote top talent and attract top talent. But what's holding people back? The fear factor. They don't understand what power they could possibly have just by being in a dominant group identity. Your voice is heard differently. The lack of kind of what's in it for me or a vision or benefits specifically. Um, and it feels like if I make a mistake, I'm going to get canceled. And we've seen evidence of that over the years. So that fear is somewhat parked in reality, but allyship is a stumble and bumble. I make mistakes all the time, and we have to be forgiving of mistakes. And people need to feel comfortable apologizing for their mistakes and owning it and getting better. We got to create a safe environment for that dialogue to happen. There's also status threat. HBR has studied this, that I'm rooting against myself is what some of the people in power that I interviewed told me. Like, why would I want to root for women or people of a different ethnicity? Like, why wouldn't I want to protect my power? But here's the thing about power. The best way to grow it is to share it. So there's a false dichotomy around power. And people feel like they're going to be less relevant. There's going to be less people like me. I'm not going to be as relevant because all these other people are going to be so different. And I'm not going to be in rooms where everybody's like me anymore. Yeah, that is true. And it also makes us better because that's how we learn. That's how we grow. So lots of different fears. I say in the book, like reframe fear as fuel. See the change, uncertainty, criticism, rejection, and think about how you could turn it into motivation for change. I really love Brene Brown's work, and she has a new book out. So I've been hearing her a lot lately, and I love what she says about this is like really think about the story you're telling yourself in your head and imagine that being a different narrative, kind of challenging these fears. Like, I'm going to be irrelevant. Like, how do I know that? Like, based on what information? I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to get canceled. Like, how do I know that? How do I know that's true? Based on what's the story I'm telling, like making up in my head versus what's the actual reality. Yeah. Yeah, doing the wrong thing, making mistakes. And that's we actually find successful businesses actually report making mistakes more often. Amy C. Edmondson's research on psychological safety shows this at hospitals, for example. We used to do a lot of near miss reporting when I ran safety at Caterpillar, and that's aligned with business success because we're proactively sharing the mistakes instead of hiding them so people can learn from them before they become catastrophic, not knowing what to do. Yeah, most people don't know where to start. And if we mind shift first before thinking about tactics and identify power, it's not finite, it's not me versus you, it's an infinite game. Simon Sinek has a great book on this about really power shared versus power over, using power with dynamics, with sharing versus over, which can be condescending, not sustainable. It starts with understanding our dimensions of power by identity. And these are a dozen different identity factors. There's many, many more. If we had more time, I'd lead us through an exercise where we kind of quantify our positions of power and where we might be more historically marginalized groups. But for now, just kind of think about power as a chance to be an ally. And no matter what, where I see allyship programs fail is when there's not a solid what's in it for me. People stop showing up. It becomes very performative, not very actionable or intentional or consistent. And those are really hallmarks of successful allyship programs. And we have to start with what's in it for me. Why do I want to be an ally? Why do I try, want to try to do this? This is hard. Why the heck am I here? And a lot of people don't answer that question, and then they show up opportunistically with the news cycle, and that's more creates more harm than good. We're leaving money on the table, if nothing else, by not exercising the benefits of allyship. But I'm curious for you, like as you resonate, what resonates with you as far as benefits? For me, like my why for allyship, and I've kind of always, this has always been something I think that just is aligned with my values. Um, Fairness and justice are my two primary core values. And so they kind of go hand in hand, right? I want things to be fair. And if they're not fair, I want them to be held accountable with justice, right? So what might resonate with you? I know I learn more in communities that are different from me. New ideas, new connections, community growth. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And there is a workbook in the chat if you want to follow along. Some of these images are captured there as well. I feel that more I am an ally, the more empathetic I am. Yeah, absolutely. Allyship really starts my last book, Allyship in Action. Empathy is one of the first chapters. Empathy and vulnerability, kind of two sides of the same coin. And they're not easy. Like it feels like it could be easy, but it's not in practice, myself included, like the empathy valve, get empathy hangovers sometimes. Some allyship do's and notes to wrap us up. Most people want to be better allies, they just don't know where to start. So maybe you're thinking about somebody in your life that you wish could be a better ally. I think coaching them of like, hey, I really see some incredible things in you. I'd love for you to be an ally. Here's a specific ask I have. One of the things I found in the research is that people are waiting for an invitation. There's some new research out of the Netherlands around moral ambition, and they've studied social movements over time. And what was the tipping point for abolition, for the end of the Holocaust, et cetera, was getting allies involved and asking them to show up. I want you to show up at this thing and do this thing. Like that specific invitation. That's why I labeled the book We Want You. It's like Uncle Sam, like you're invited. We want you here. Because as hard as we tried the last 5 years, I think people have felt like if I'm a part of a dominant group, I'm the problem, right? Not the solution. And it's a both and it's a paradox. It can be a problem and the solution, part of the problem, part of the solution as well. We're not looking for knights in shining armor. We're not looking for rescue capes. We're not looking for saviors. That is not what an ally is. It's about sharing our power. So a power with approach would say, hey, I know this person, they have a job opportunity that's really aligned with what you want to do with your career. Happy to make an intro. That's a power with. Power over would be like, I know this person. Let me walk you over to their office. Let me have lunch with you and them and like control the relationship and make it about me and not about you and not get out of the way so it's not a sustainable form of allyship. So, a very important distinction is power with. And however you want to define allyship, you don't even have to use the word. You can use advocate, you can use mentor or sponsor, whatever works. It's less about the words and more about the work. And I define allyship as leveraging your power and privilege to help other people. And primary roles I use are mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy, coaching, and challenging. But at the end of the day, create space for others to be themselves, to be heard, to be seen, to feel a sense of belonging. You ask questions like, what does support look like for you? Without presuming. It's not the golden rule, not treating somebody how they want you want to be treated, but how they want to be treated, the platinum rule. Allies keep their radar up for non-inclusive behavior, microaggressions, interruptions, taking credit for others' ideas, not being invited to social events, like when I wasn't invited to golf outings or beer drinking things, in more male-dominated spaces. I had to learn to navigate those things so I could be included because that's where networking happens, where career decisions are made. And allies know their voices matter. We can use our voices for positive change. We need more people speaking up. And the last kind of question I wanted to leave you with is actually two, but three more questions. Cheating. Who have been your greatest allies and what did they do? Sometimes it's hard to know what step to take, but if it's been modeled for you, I have two allies. One is my current ally in higher education. I just started teaching, and he has absolutely like mentored me, sponsored me, coached me, advocated for me, all the things. He's kind of the epitome of allyship. His name's Ray, and every chance I get, I thank him. Like, that advice is really helpful. I use your feedback to do this. Sometimes we need to recognize and reward the behavior we want modeled more for others. I had another ally early in my career, JT, and I remember my first time facilitating. He said, Julie, I see you as an ally, or as a facilitator, rather. If only he'd said ally, that would have been really futuristic. But you're a great facilitator. And I'd be like, I can't facilitate. It's only old white guys that get to do that. It was in agriculture, but most industries are pretty male dominated. And he said, well, you did it this time. I saw the client give you feedback on it this time, and I'm not understanding why you're not a facilitator. It's like, yeah, sometimes allies put up the mirror for you to see what you need to see, not what you want to see. They challenge you to think bigger, and I know I wouldn't be sitting here had he not said that. His former colleague turned dear friend all the ways. Yeah, I had a boss who was an ally. My entire team is about allyship. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. So just seven things to leave you with real quick. Embed this, whatever we call it, inclusion, allyship, workplace culture, talent retention. I just call it whatever you call it, get the work done. Map it to a business problem, embed it into your culture. Don't make this an ad hoc thing. We measure what's important. Let's do that with allyship. Give an intentional invitation. I want you to come to this thing and do this thing. Be very specific with people. They need guidance right now. They're scared. There's a movable middle inside your organization. I bet the middle layer is where things get challenged. They feel stuck. They don't have time. They don't have support. They're hearing stuff from up and down and really squished in the middle. So that's a really, really big opportunity. Allyship programs. I'm doing allyship programs with a number of household names, companies that you would think aren't doing DEI anymore. They are, and they're rebranding and they're calling it, but it's through the lens of mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy, coaching, and challenging. So however we define these programs, it's really clear that we need more supportive workplace cultures. So it has to be embedded, which means it needs to be consistent, it needs to be intentional. Senior leadership needs to be engaged. And our policies need to reflect this, the policy work, the grunt work of inclusion work, not the sexy, glamorous part, is what we could be doing right now, working on systems. A lot of that is not going to be flagged publicly, and it's really the pinnacle of making an inclusive culture. So I'd argue focus on that, less on the education, less on the programming, more on behind the scenes. How do we make this systemic? And pipeline proactivity. We're going to have pipeline problems with talent. So let's get proactive about it and think about, what does Gen Z look like? No racial majority, 25% LGBTQ plus, 25% neurodivergent coming into the workplace. How are we prepared for that? What are we going to do to make sure we resonate with future generations and as consumers too? But this is legacy work. I wish this work could be done in my lifetime or even my children's lifetime. We're centuries away from equality happening from a racial and gender perspective alone. But I have hope. I have hope in the future because of my allies, because of people that care. So just ideas that are resonating with you. I'd love to wrap up on a positive note. If there's a new idea you got today or something that makes sense, or We'll certainly have plenty of time for Q&A as well. I know Amy's gonna come back and join us. Oh, and thanks, Alexia, for sharing the link to my book. If you want to dive in, there's way more research in the chat link as well.
Julie, you kind of stumped me actually with the like as you know, I I like to practice allyship and I intentionally say practice allyship, not I am an ally. But even when you said like what practices resonate with you, I got a little stumped.
Yeah, like
I
it's overwhelming. I mean, that was the word that someone used at the beginning. It can be overwhelming. Like there's so many
right?
pieces. I try to say like it's choose your own adventure. Like just start somewhere and see what works and try something and iterate over time. But I do think
Yeah.
that's what like really slows people down as they get in their head about it. Like I want to do this right. I want to do it this way. And it's just it's messy. It's imperfect work.
Yeah, and it's kind of an odd time to consider oneself an ally, not not because it's not needed, not because you don't have the same beliefs and everything, but you don't know how it's going to be perceived, right? And I'm not sure if that's a perception problem or a vocabulary problem. So I would love to get your opinion on that because as many of you Forte fans know, we have our own work around allyship, and even we have started to change some of our language to advocacy. So, what are your thoughts on the language issues surrounding it? By the way, I did my air quotes late, like I said,
Yeah.
language issues. No, it was language
Well,
issues.
right, it's always changed. Our language has always changed for the work. So I've been doing this since 2014. What we called DEI in 2014 was just diversity. I mean, you had chief diversity officers. That's what it looked like at most companies. Some
Yeah,
had employee resource groups, but only like the massive global companies. So then in 2020, we all know what happened, right? DEI became the new acronym. Before that, it was actually D and I. So in like 2015 and 2020, it kind of transitioned to D and I, diversity and inclusion. Then 2020 has DEI,
yeah,
diversity, equity, inclusion. And then, of course, now, it's executive orders, blah, blah, blah. Um, so I'm okay. The name's always changed to reflect society. Let's not act like we're better. Like rebrands happen. I've never worked for a company that hasn't rebranded something. So it's as long as the packaging, the brand is willing to update, that what's inside of it is still the same, right? The words
yeah,
are just the package and the work is the inside. So I'm actually, companies are being very quiet about this for obvious reasons, but the companies I'm working with, like household big company names that may appear in the anti-DEI headlines that are doing it, are just quietly because they know it's right for business and they know they need to stay relevant to Gen Z, and they're going to have a labor shortage problem. Like they are not dummies. They know that this is what's going to happen. They're just really quietly doing the work. And they're
yeah,
actually doing the things that I always wanted them to do that they didn't want to do because it wasn't exciting. But the system stuff, like inclusive hiring practices, looking at your performance review process and pipeline and making sure it's equitable, making sure people are getting equitable feedback and getting equitable mentorship and sponsorship opportunities. Like that's not exciting, but it's really darn important. So
right.
have at it.
Well, and by the way, I want to encourage everyone to type their own questions in the Q&A function or type it in the chat. I'll see it either way so we can ask you, Julie. But I want to you actually mentioned kind of the labor shortage and you had talked about that in the beginning, right? I wanted you to explain a little bit more because honestly, I wasn't sure I understood it when you said that we don't have a diversity problem as much as an overrepresentation problem. Can you talk through that a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just reframing, Amy. So we know McKinsey publishes the Women in the Workplace report that I know know
Yeah,
but your hand. It's like it's coming out soon, or it should hope.
I think so.
I
November,
would
usually around
it's
November.
usually October.
Oh, is it October? Okay.
Yeah, it usually is right around now, so hopefully that's still happening. I'm sure it is. Um, But when they publish the data on the pipeline, so that slide that you're referencing was like entry level, manager, C-suite, executive,
Yeah,
right? So like the different layers of the organization. When they published it and called it an underrepresentation problem, meaning that women, people of color primarily were underrepresented at the top and overrepresented at the bottom, it created like a backlash effect of like, well, underrepresented. And there's this whole thing of underrepresentation. Like they're not actually underrepresented. Like, in leadership, they are, but not in population. So anyway, there's some pushback there. When they reframe it as rather than underrepresentation, it's an over-representation problem. Suddenly it's like, oh, yeah, we do have a lot of white guys at the top
yeah,
and not as much at the bottom. That is a mismatch. So it's just a little like wordsmithing back to
got it.
word. Language is important. It just reframes so it's a less of a threat and more of an opportunity.
Love it.
People get less defensive. I find this psychology stuff fascinating, right? It's
Right.
like, how do you frame it as like a gain versus a loss? Like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, it fights this like zero sum mentality because I get that a lot. I was like, oh, we promoted all these women and people of color, therefore white guys aren't getting promoted anymore. It's like, what? Like, that's rarely rooted in, I haven't seen data to show, to reinforce that false
Right.
narrative. But it's this whole finite thing versus infinite thing. No, we have more women and people of color and the top of the organization. We're going to have more seats for everybody, not just seats for them. It's going to grow the organization. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I did have another question that kind of harkens back though to the labor shortage because I was so fascinated by that. I probably could have spent an entire hour just talking about that or listen to you, I should say, not me talking, listening to you about that. Because you also mentioned AI is not going to replace, right,
mhm.
that gap. But does AI have a role in allyship?
Oh, Amy, doozy there. Yeah. Well, so I just took this AI class. I'm teaching at Indiana University, and there's a wonderful AI class that I just took. And what I would say, I hadn't thought about it this way. I was thinking more from a teaching perspective and
Yeah,
trying to use it in my teaching. But yeah, it can be a thought partner. Like, I mean, it'd be interesting. I haven't tried this yet, but to put in some prompts of like, I'm looking for a mentor. Like, what qualities should I consider? Like, I had my students take their 360 data as leaders and performance review data, upload it to AI, and then have it like give you input on your leadership action plan.
right.
And it was really cool what AI was able to do. So yeah, it could be like a good brainstorming partner. It could be a good data summary person.
Yeah, I'm still at that point where I'm not overly nervous. I'm more excited about all of the possibilities that AI,
Hmm.
that brings to us. Now, having said that, I understand the threats are real, right? And that, people are losing their jobs. But I just wondered if, as you said before, like reframing something as an opportunity, and I wondered if could there be an opportunity here?
For sure.
Okay. Have to dive into this because I've experienced this firsthand. As you know, Forte has done its own research in the allyship space. And what we found, especially when it came to men thinking about gender equity, somewhere in the mid 2010s, what we found is that it wasn't that people didn't want to be allies.
Mm,
It was that they thought someone else was handling things, or they thought, well, there's no there, like, I want to do it, I don't know what to do, right?
mhm.
But there were that group that were fearful of losing their relevance, right? Can you talk more about that? Then how do you reframe that as fuel? How do you
Mhm.
take that? How do you make the
Mhm.
business case? How do you assure someone you're not going to lose your job? And just because people don't look like you in the room doesn't mean you're not still like a key voice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of that bystander effect. Like we are less likely to take action the more people that are around us if we see a problem because we assume someone else will handle it, just like you said.
Absolutely.
Oh, someone else is going to mentor her. Someone else sees the potential in them. Like they'll take care of it. Mm. So, I mean, I think it just starts with like pumping the brakes a little bit on that assumption. Like, how do you know someone else is going to take care of it? Like, why not me? And that kind of introspective work, I think that sometimes as people that want to help allies, that's something we can really do is hold up the mirror to them and say, hey, you've been an incredible ally to me. I would love it if you could do ABC. And if they say something like, well, so and so is handling that, or, just little old me, like, what would I possibly do? Reinforce like their positive behavior, like pay attention to allies and the making and the little breadcrumbs that they're leaving. That is one of the things I found with allies is they're very, very humble. I mentioned Ray and JT in my story, like my two big allies, and they both were like, "Oh, no big deal. Like I would do this for anybody." Would you? Like, and it is a big deal, and they are very quick to brush it off, like it's not. And we really, I appreciate the humility. It's better than bragging, but it's also not exactly inspirational to other allies around them. So maybe that's how we can help them.
Yeah.
Help emphasize these are the behaviors that have been helpful to me. Can you do that for more people?
That's I really like that because and it's funny I know that we have some friends in the space who often say you can't declare yourself an ally, right? Someone has to declare you an ally, and I believe that, but you can point out maybe even ally behaviors. Like, is there a way that you can point out ally behaviors that you do yourself
Mhm.
just to kind of start spreading knowledge? And can you think of an example of that?
Oh yeah, totally. I have a whole chapter in the book about storytelling, allyship storytelling, and storytelling is such a powerful technique, right? And I know there's an exercise at Forte that I reference in the book, the interview approach that you do in
Yeah.
the advocacy training, to learn someone's story, and that is just powerful. But no, I mean, I've heard so many great stories over the years. Probably the one that lands the most with people. I mean, who's not facing polarization or having a hard conversation with somebody, especially about politics or social issues right now.
Right.
So probably the story that's resonating the most that I use as an ally to teach people, like through the story, is a couple years ago, I was at a school board election supporting the candidates that were at the time pro DEI, pro inclusion. This was like a real thing that happened years ago. And I'm in the parking lot supporting the candidates, and the opposing candidate support team is also camped out with me in the parking lot for like 3 hours. And you're like, oh God, this is gonna be awful. So your first hour, cold, nothing. Second hour, it's like, all right, just say something, Julie. So this guy's name is Dave. I was like, hey, Dave, like, tell me about your platform. And he, goes on and on for a little too long, but I listened. Empathy first, right? It can be exhausting, but it's real, it's needed. And I was like, oh, okay, if I'm hearing you correctly, parents' rights are important, test scores are important. Yeah, me too. As a parent in the school district, those things are absolutely important to me too. And I genuinely meant that. And I was like, can I tell you about our platform? It's like, oh yeah, sure. And I just pretty much summed it up as like, I think it's doing kids a disservice to not teach them about diversity that they will naturally experience in the world. And we went back and forth, and he did ask some questions. And at the end of the 3 hours, I didn't change his mind. We didn't solve any world's problems, but he did say, he's like, I've never met someone like you. Like, I'm glad I met you. And hearts and minds aren't going to change overnight, but we got to keep talking. And
You have to keep talking. Exactly. The conversation is what was important, not necessarily kind of the end game.
yeah, you can't go into conversation like that hoping to change someone's mind. It's just not, I wouldn't want that. Why would someone want that?
Right.
That's the hard part, I think, as allies, is we got to have those hard conversations and can't expect everybody to be an ally. But the data is actually really promising. 90% of people want to be allies, which makes me wonder about the 10%, honestly. But 90% is a lot more than we're led to believe right now.
Absolutely.
It's this whole like first step problem that we're having. So that's where the invitation comes in. Like, we want you seriously.
Yeah. I just want to I've one more question myself,
Yeah.
but and then I really want to get to some audience Q&A, but audience, you have to help me out and post some Q in the Q&A area. Um, but here's my question. We work so with a lot of, we work so often with women's ERGs at our partner companies.
Mhm.
And I happen to know that a handful of them, great programs, great initiatives. They put on wonderful events. They have meaningful discussions. But their biggest challenge is getting men to join,
Mhm.
getting men to come to the events, getting men to show up at the meetings. Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's an age-old problem since 2014 when I started doing this work. Yeah, I remember going to women's events, employee resource group events, conferences, and it's like all white women, like very monolithic. Again, they're waiting for the invitations. Like so many allies told me, like, oh, well, when she asked me to come to the program or speak on the panel and told me why, I was like, oh, okay, of course. Like you're just like sitting there waiting for somebody to say, we want you to be included in this. So what I've been coaching clients on that have this problem is have a very clear ask and the language of the invitation. Make a challenge for every woman to invite five potential male allies and not just invite them like, hey, want this thing come, like, hey, you've been a mentor to me. Please come. I'd love for you to be a part of this. It's really important to me. And as women, we are that disease to please, and we don't like to be, forceful and all the social conditioning that's not helpful. Is get over it. It's not about you. Like you're making an ask not just for you, but on behalf of women.
Yeah,
So like, what's the worst going to happen? They say no? Okay.
right.
But yeah, we're in some weird times where I just heard it so many times from my own strong allies. They would say they won't be there. I went once and it was just complete. I felt like I was all the problem. Like I didn't feel safe. I was like, wow, that's so interesting to me. We
Well,
we know women don't feel safe a lot, but the first time a man experiences it, it's like, ah, I'm out.
but that actually could be a call to action to all of us who are seeking allyship,
Right.
right? Is to say, okay, make sure that you're creating a welcoming environment.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're not looking at the like everybody that walks in that doesn't look like you as someone who's going to be offended, or someone, like have a real discussion. I don't know. It's a hard road to
Mhm.
travel, I think.
Yeah.
At the same time, and the reason I stopped mid-sentence, because I've also been hearing from our ERGs, by the way, that a lot of their own events have been watered down because,
Totally.
right, they have to make them safer environments. So as I was literally saying, make the other person feel safe, I'm like, well, wait, hold on. So I myself
Why
don't,
can't we all feel safe?
right, or I guess equally unsafe. I don't know. But
Totally.
so it is hard. I am not going to keep you on too long with my own questions. I happen to know your phone number and can probably call you whenever I have a question.
It's
But I do
always
want
good
to
chatting.
thank you so much for your time, Julie. I love hearing from you. I love the new book. But I also, before I let you go, can you just plug Little Allies
Yeah.
really quickly,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that is actually my absolute favorite of your pieces, because I do think it starts from such a young age. So can you talk about that just a tiny bit?
Oh, yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, Little Allies is a nonprofit I started. Just really the idea was like I'm doing a lot of work at corporate, but talking to 40 somethings about inclusion seems like their opportunity exists earlier in life.
Yeah.
Behavior can be changed as we age. It's just much more entrenched and more difficult. So like, why don't we get it right from the start? At the same time, I was having these like really big conversations about racism and sexism with my daughter, who's now 11 and who I learned from a lot. But the data on this is pretty simple. Bias is pretty well baked at age 12. Critical thinking skills really turn on from age 10 to 12. So we've got like a really cool, tight window in middle
Yeah.
school where we can help kids understand like, here are some biases that you might experience because you're a human being and you're not bad or flawed. You're just human. And here's some things you can do. And so the children's book, The Little Allies, was really geared towards these little vignettes, these little stories where kids could see like, oh, that happened to her. Oh, so now when that happens, I know it's a thing, and I could say this just like the character in the book is
Yeah.
Ally. We'll play on words, but and then that's how we learn through stories. And people read the book, they're like, does this real? Does this really happen? Like in disbelief, and you're like, yeah, all the time,
All the time. All the
and
time.
we just need to see the stories through sometimes a different perspective. And then I know just from my experience reading the book with my kids is they ask really curious questions. Like there is a vignette about a gender non-binary person, and it's like, wait, what? Is it a boy or a girl? And like that's how our brain works. It's not like a bad thing. It's just we like categories, and
Yeah.
things don't always squarely fit in the category. It's a paradoxical thing, and that paradoxical thinking is really helpful for kids. So long explanation, but start the conversation earlier in the little Alice children's book. You can get anywhere on Amazon, etc.
And
And I'll
and
proceed.
honestly, or like I've just learned, I'm not the only fan because for those of you that don't have access to see the chat, someone also just wrote in that they love Little Allies. So thank you
Oh,
for
that makes my heart
saying that.
happy.
Well, Julie, as always, thank you so much for your time. Any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
And no, I was just gonna say actually, I'm struggling. I moved and I have a box full of little Allies books. So if anybody knows a nonprofit that I could ship them to, I mean, seriously, I was thinking about posting this on LinkedIn. I have like probably 40 copies of the book, and it's like this would be great for like an after school center or something like that. Childcare resources, Dee Dee, hit me up. I would love to send them your way. Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's
Send me a
amazing.
note.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to invite my colleague, Alexia. Did you have any parting thoughts for our audience?
Yes, I do. So I'm just going to quickly make sure I share Julie's email because it went to panelists, just a
Oh,
heads
oh,
up.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
No worries, no worries. Happens all the time. So yeah, feel free to reach out, especially for, I believe, the individual who mentioned a place that could home the books that you have sitting there. So, but again, thank you so much, Julie, for being here today, and for Amy to help facilitate our Q&A for today's webinar on Business Essentials. So I just have a couple of like housekeeping things as far as what's coming up at Forte, because we definitely like to stay busy. We want to make sure that we're providing webinars that resonate with our audience and content that you're really dealing with in your day-to-day life. And so in addition to obviously today's webinar, some other things that we're having that are coming up are a career coach workshop that's Biscuit Bite, leadership lessons from Ted Lasso. So if you saw the show, we have someone who's going to be kind of talking about different leadership lessons. If you're interested in that, you can register. That's October 15th. We also have every fall, October 29th, we have our virtual career fair. So if you are jobs searching or just kind of looking for a new opportunity, even if you're not actively applying, feel free to attend and register for that as well. And then the last one I want to mention is our next Business Essential, where we're going to talk about charitable giving. And it's actually led by our Alumni Leadership Council. So we're really excited to be able to highlight some Forte talent within this next Business Essential. So that's pretty much what we have going on at Forte. Again, thank you so much for joining us here today, and we hope to see everyone soon at an